I'm trying to. I can't get in.
We have a presentation by Buyer Blender Bell to give us the survey results and programming interview takeaways. So I will let you begin.
Okay, great. Thank you, Josie.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. Good to see many of you that we've met and some of you that we haven't yet. Thank you all for your time tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to share the work. I'm Neil Kittredge with Buyer Blender Bell. Great pronunciation, by the way. But it's BBB for short. We are architects and planners. I'm joined by my colleagues, Raina Ehrlich, Yuting Pan, and Monica Siebenmorgen is on Zoom. And we're also joined by our colleagues from VHB, Ray Gradwell and Jonathan Kupfer, who's also on Zoom. So BBB, we are handling urban planning, architecture, historic preservation issues. VHB is handling engineering, civil engineering, transportation, traffic, parking, vehicle movement, and so on. I think if we can share the presentation slides. Jump into this, but I think just want to pull up the agenda to tell you what we're going to talk about. Okay, so we're talking about our data gathering and programming phase. We're nearing the end of that phase. This is the first of three. Oh, okay. This is the this is the first of three phases. So this is really us learning from you and learning about the village and the facilities and the needs and processing that into like a data analysis of space needs that will inform future design and planning strategies that we'll be looking at in the upcoming stages. So this is a lot of these issues may be familiar to a lot of you already, but this is really important due diligence for us, kind of absorb and understand all of this information as a starting point for the actual analysis that's to come. We also wanted to share the results of our public online survey that was a great success. We had almost 450 people respond to the survey in December and January. So thanks to everyone who responded. We got lots of great information from that. And then we want to plug our open house, which is going to be on Thursday, February 26th from 4 to 8 p.m. And really looking forward to, again, like the survey, just an opportunity for the public to have input into this plan and this process, which is very important. Oh, there's a lag. Okay. Just want to mention a lot of work has been done in Irvington over the years to establish, very important community goals, including with the comprehensive plan, historic district guidelines, many other things. And it is important that this facilities plan, while this is for the municipal facilities, that we think of this as building on all of that past work, as helping implement, those goals, those community goals, and also to plan the facilities in the context of the character of the village. I think that we all love and appreciate, and the beautiful historic character, and scenic environment, and also in coordination with other community needs that are being looked at kind of in parallel, and with the upcoming TOD study for housing, for economic development, for historic preservation. So we think of these things as all connected and all integrated. We want to make sure the facilities plan responds to all of those influences. Next.
What that process looks like. We started in October, this past fall. It's about a 9-month process overall, so we anticipate wrapping up in late June. As you can see here, we have 3 core phases, starting with data gathering and needs assessment. And this is, as Neil described, a very important just due diligence phase where we are, just understanding all of the needs and challenges and opportunities, both for each of the departments and also the sites at a just objective level. That gives us then the ability to proceed, based on data, based on facts, based on sort of, analysis. The next phase will then be site feasibility and architectural test fits. And this is where we're looking at all of the different options that are on the table. Really, everything is on the table. Test fitting and looking at, what works and what doesn't work. And then the third phase is final recommendations and including cost estimating. And the blue stars on this diagram are like milestones of community engagement, but we really want to stress that this is designed to be maximally inclusive. So the idea is that we are engaging with the board, we have a steering committee, we have, just broad public engagement throughout the process, because this really needs to be a plan that we all create together, not that we go away and, and hand you something at the end. And so that's just a very important part. So again, another plug for Thursday, February 26th, 4 to 8 p.m. It'll be at the public library.
Apologies for being late.
No problem. Welcome. All right, next slide, please. Many of you may already be aware, there's 10 departments that we are looking at in this overall process. The 6 on the left are kind of the core of the study, where we are looking most deeply at what the facility needs are. And then we're looking at lightly at the other 4 on the right-hand side. Next. Study governance and engagement. This is, as I described, meant to be maximally inclusive. So all of the decisions, at the end and throughout the process will be directed by the Board of Trustees. We're working very closely with a steering committee, and we have 6 people who sit on that committee: the mayor, the board liaison, village administrator, 2 co-chairs of the facilities planning committee, and then a community engagement advisor. And we meet with this group actually bi-weekly. So it is, very engaged and intensive. Our interdisciplinary team, as Neil described, and then all of the bubbles at the bottom of this slide show you the different types of, as we call them, stakeholders or user groups that we are talking to throughout this process. And we have already met at least once with all of the departments, those green and blue bubbles on the left. And then we are also starting engagement with, any number of community groups, business owners, other residents, the village committees. Just we need everyone to be a part of this process. And thank you all for participating in the survey. We did have almost 450 people respond, which is phenomenal. So feel like we're starting out on a great foot. Next slide, please. So Monica, over to you.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So a little bit more in detail overview of the programming process and where we are today. The first piece of the process, as Raina mentioned, is the data and the input. So these are the interviews, the benchmarking tours, research into other facilities and municipalities, and best practices. And then those pieces inform the next piece, which is what we call a draft space program. And that is a summary of what we heard from all the departments and all the groups, essentially all the spaces that they need to effectively serve the village and to do their work. So we now have that draft summary, which is why it says we are here. And those documents are currently being reviewed by each department, which we'll get into a little bit more in detail in a second. And then once we have their feedback, we revise that into what we call a final space program. That's a confirmed summary that we all agree upon is the right mix and the overall square footage of everything that we need for everyone. And then that information informs the final space program informs the next step in the planning process, which are the site assessments and the planning level test fits and the community events that are coming up. So next slide. Digging a little bit further into it, as Raina mentioned, the key groups. So we did tours and interviews with all of the key groups: fire department, police, DPW, village administration, justice court, rec and parks, ambulance corps, and the senior center. And we also met with the public library, the theater, and the green team. Next slide. There's a tiny flag. There we go. And then we also conducted site visits to Ardsley Firehouse, the DPW garage, the Scarsdale Public Safety Building. We looked at we researched other comparable facilities, the Pelham Municipal Center, Chappaqua. We also looked at a number of other relevant previous studies and designs. A couple of those are specific to Irvington, but then there were a couple of other ones that were really good references for us coming out of Beacon and Ossining and Peekskill. And then last but certainly not least, we're looking at all applicable compliance standards. So like NFPA 1500, OSHA, ADA accessibility, to name a few. And then the last slide, so a couple of key notes about the draft program, and the two icons that you see on the screen. This is sort of graphically what it looks like. We're not expecting you to be able to read this, but the top left is the meeting minutes. That's what we issued to each group after we met with them to sort of document what we heard. They gave us comments on that. And then the bottom right are these Excel tabulations. This is what we call our draft space program. So each group got one of these to validate and work through to make sure that we got everything right. So we do just want to be clear about what this draft program is and what it's not. The estimated program is based on the department interviews. It's based on benchmarking and best practices. It's location agnostic and independent of any existing buildings. So, for example, what does, Recreation and Parks need to provide their programs, no matter where they are, no matter where they land at the end of the day, whether they stay where they are or they go somewhere else. I'm not suggesting either of those. Point just being it's very agnostic of an existing or specific building. It just simply represents a hypothetical tally of all the spaces that each group requires. And then for each department, we have some kind of optionality built in. So we're calling it sort of a base program and a full program. So the base is really, what does everybody need to effectively do their work? And then the second piece of it is sort of more of a full program. Like what are some additional pieces that groups might benefit from? So, they could be things that help recruit and retain staff and volunteers. They could be specific things that would serve community needs. There's a number of those built in as well. And those are going to be important because as we move into the site assessment, we're going to be talking about, what we can accommodate in different locations and different buildings. And, sometimes that's starts to be where the, tough decisions kind of get made. This will provide us what we often refer to as some levers. So, we can kind of push and pull the sizes of programs a little bit and see what can be accommodated. Back to you, I think.
All right, so we're going to go through kind of a bit of a high-level overview of what we learned from each department and from these other references and resources that we've been looking into, and all of which has been kind of the things that we learned that have informed this kind of more data-oriented space analysis that Monica was describing, and that has been completed in draft form and is now under review by each department. So, as we mentioned, this is kind of the starting point to ultimately test multiple options and scenarios and look at the pros and cons of each one relative to the program needs. So just starting with the fire department and the Irvington Firehouse, we know, and some of the things that we learned here, overall strengths of the current facility, really, a primary one is the location. It's a central location in the village that allows, ease of distribution or ease of access to calls at various points, kind of in the 4 quadrants of village from the center point, and also just being an all volunteer department. We learned that this is also, a point about members need to get to the department, to then go out on the call. So we need to think about locationally, people getting both to it and also then, trucks getting out and getting to their call locations. The challenges here, also the Main Street location. And we say that because, as we all know, there are fire trucks leaving in a hurry and backing in, and the department works very hard to ensure safe conditions, but we are in a busy pedestrian area and there's traffic and there's, people walking around. And so that's just something that needs to be managed, and that, that is managed very well. And it's just, the nature of this particular site. And then, secondly, just kind of big picture, this is a building that's more than 60 years old. And it is just simply a building that was designed in a different era when standards were different. And it is significantly undersized and kind of under-equipped for, the kind of modern operational and safety standards of a firehouse, that if we would design one from scratch today. And of course, the department, and this is true, I think, what we learned from all the departments, are working very hard to make the most of the spaces that they have, and they're, really making the most of them. There's um, obviously would be a great benefit to be in a more adapted and contemporary space. So if we go to the next slide, we have analyzed in detail the floor plans of each building to really understand them. I think one thing that you can see on this plan is that most largest space in the building is the apparatus bay where the fire trucks are kept. And this was designed at a time when the vehicles were smaller than they are today. So the bay just simply doesn't have, if you go to the next slide, I think you can see, it doesn't have the space, the clearances, any longer. The vehicles are now bigger, the modern vehicles, and so they're taking up more room. And so there is insufficient space, just in between the trucks. And you can see on the bottom what the standard should be, which is almost twice what we have currently in the building. You can see an example from Pelham of a modern firehouse recently built with a kind of a up-to-date apparatus bay for this size vehicle. Obviously, higher ceilings, and just larger clearances. And this creates operational challenges and safety challenges, obviously, for members going out on calls, and also affects just delaying the turnout time because people are squeezing around each other to get trucks ready and to go. Go to the next slide. And I think as we go through this, you'll see that some of these issues are really kind of urgent and critical from a kind of a safety and code and compliance point of view, that we really need to bring these up to what the current standards call for. And as Monica said, others are going to be considered as a kind of a range of different prioritization that we're all going to have to, work together on, depending on the space available, the budgets, the feasibility, and so on. So another sort of very critical issue that we have is concerning the firematics operations. And this is, one of the key things here are around health and safety requirements and standards for a modern department. Decontamination is a really big issue. And what we have today is the decontamination equipment is stored inside the apparatus bay and doesn't have its own dedicated rooms. We know that that's inadequate, that doesn't meet current NFPA standards. And what we see in other contemporary facilities is basically, what we heard from the department is this sequence of, consider the apparatus bay to be a hot zone when people are coming back from an incident. There are contaminants, biohazards, all kinds of issues that they are dealing with. They need to move into separate spaces for decontamination, to strip down, shower, get cleaned up, get that stuff into a cleaning facility. Before then, the firefighters move into what's called the cold zone, or the more public areas of the building. And this obviously prevents exposure to these risks for the firefighters, but it also prevents the cross-contamination that is currently a risk of kind of bringing things home, in your personal vehicle or your clothes, and issues like that, just because the current space doesn't allow for that. And we know, and I want to acknowledge that there is a plan to implement a sort of a shorter term project to address the decontamination sort of in the interim before we get to like a bigger firehouse capital project. And that that's what makes this one of those more urgent issues being addressed in the short term. Next. Other issues around storage, and just insufficient space in the building. We have a lot of expensive equipment being stored in sheds outside, being stored just in extra spaces wherever we can find it. If you look at a modern firehouse, there's very well organized and sort of purpose-built storage for each type of equipment. And that obviously helps with the lifespan of those investments and just, again, operations. Next. The administrative space, the office space is small, it's shared. It just doesn't meet current standards. The training room is a nice, sizable, multifunction room that actually, can perform a lot of different functions. There's no elevator, so the building is not ADA. This is just something, if we did a new building or a renovation, it just needs to be done. That room could serve a lot more functions if it was accessible to the full community. firefighters and public. And then, you know, as you heard from Monica a little bit, what we're seeing in some of the other examples, Ardsley is shown here, is that to sort of aid with recruitment and retention of volunteers over time and into the future, we're seeing, you know, day rooms, fitness rooms, and spaces that really help support, you know, the volunteer firefighters. So that's, you know, something that there are examples of that that we can point to in other departments. Next. And then just lastly, in terms of public accommodation in a modern facility, you would see more of a lobby, more of a welcoming area for the public to arrive at the building, to, you know, arrive for events, for visits, for tours, that sort of thing, and just general public. Next. And just one last little point is that these are examples of newly built facilities. Again, this is Pelham. Like Irvington, this is on a street where it's one-sided, so the trucks back in. And so there's those issues of managing the sidewalk traffic. In certain cases, on the next slide, the kind of, when possible, some new firehouses are being built with drive-through bays. And so there's no backing in and then going back out forward. You drive in one side, you drive out the other, which kind of speeds up operations and makes things very efficient. And obviously that's an ideal scenario, not a requirement, but something we're seeing in you know, a number of examples. All right, moving on to police, right next door to us here on the other side of the wall. Again, Main Street location is both a strength and a challenge for similar reasons. The police actually have a lot more public walk-ins and engagement that, you know, they appreciate being in that location in terms of just interacting with the public, but similar challenges, as I mentioned before, for fire. And again, in this case, in a 120-plus-year-old building, just in spaces that are much smaller and undersized for the standards of what a police department would be designed today. Next. You all know the lobby is very cramped, doesn't have a good waiting area, doesn't have privacy for, you have victims coming in to report crimes, things like that. People are kind of bumping into each other. Next. The, you know, recurring themes. Administrative spaces, office spaces are not private. They don't provide for confidentiality, for file storage, for records. With the police department, police station, one of the big issues that we learned about is that, and that they worked very hard to overcome and work with the space they have, is there is a lack of separation between spaces for the general public, spaces for victims reporting a crime, spaces for defendants who are brought in, and, you know, these areas are all mixed, and so, you know, they are working to keep people separated. If there's a conflict between people, if they are bringing a prisoner in from a car, you know, they don't have a separate entrance into a secure location that they can bring that individual, and so these conflicts are just things that we really want to avoid, and I think, you know, design in a different way if we have the opportunity. And we saw just this morning at the Scarsdale Public Safety Facility, you know, an organizational system where there are different hallways with different doors that can be locked and unlocked in order to keep people, you know, kind of the circulation separate. And so that's, I think, just a very important kind of overall kind of design factor. One important thing is for youthful offenders, there are state standards about finding less sort of softer environment to bring them when they're being interviewed and when they're being held. And those state standards are, there's a special exemption being given here so that they can use either the courtroom or the detective's office for this. But again, as we saw in Scarsdale this morning, there is there's a way to do these things where you have appropriate spaces to bring in youthful offenders and you know, have them stay for a period of time that we can't meet in the current facility. Storage, again, common theme. Next slide. And then I think the biggest individual need that we heard from the police department is the lack of a training space. So fire and IVAC have training spaces in the building. Police have to find and schedule times, and there's just scheduling conflicts. And so they're sometimes doing training in moving the desks and using their office spaces, which is not ideal. And they don't have a space that can be converted into an emergency operations center. So that's also a question. We've seen examples where these kinds of spaces are shared between departments. That could be a consideration in certain scenarios, but from the police perspective, that's a need. Next. And then finally, just the fact that the squad cars are crowded in the area immediately outside the building, where we have a lot of members of the public coming and going, and it's difficult to just get in the cars and get out to an emergency with traffic conflicts and so forth. And so that's just something to consider. The example of Scarsdale there is, sort of that's a shared facility. So fire is on one end of the building, the police are on the end that you see here, and there's just a kind of a dedicated, organized parking lot for the squad cars, for the officers' private cars, that allows for that circulation, also bringing prisoners in. I think with that,
All right,
we'll
next,
turn it over to
yeah,
you.
we're going to cover our third sort of emergency service group here. So IVAC, as you all know, is a nonprofit, privately run service, volunteer. They do have some paid staff for overnights that is run independently from the village administration. But it's, a key player in all of this, both in terms of the services they provide and also, of course, the site. So a lot of the themes that you're hearing are consistent here. So I'm not going to cover some of those, but we go to the next slide. I'll give you an overview. Charles, are you able to? Next slide, thank you. So quick review of the spaces that they have. Here you see it's 2 stories. There's the sort of bay for the vehicles on the ground floor, and then meeting room, which is also their training facility, and some staff offices upstairs. Go to the next. The primary issues that they are dealing with is that the training room has to meet state requirements for their certification. So they're sort of struggling, but making it work. And then I think most importantly, for their 24/7 readiness and the overnight accommodations, they have sort of these ad hoc sleeping arrangements. So you see they have the cot that is in the open area. So someone is sleeping there just like, in the middle of the open area. And then the other second bed they have is in the sort of behind the garage, and it's actually open to the garage. So you have exhaust from the, from the vehicles. So again, obviously like not a good situation. And that's, something that the paid staff are doing, the overnights. So if we were to look at, new facilities, we would want to be solving for that. We go to the next slide. Their staff offices, they're currently constrained. They don't have enough for their current staff, but again, making it work, as many other departments do. Go to the next slide. I think their probably, biggest financial issue is that the garage is actually undersized to the standard vehicle. So they have to custom order their ambulances to be shorter and also more narrow to fit in the garage. So that is just a financial cost. It's more expensive, and it also makes it's a longer lead time for getting the vehicle because they can't just buy something off the shelf. So again, in an ideal world, the garage would fit standard vehicles. And then they are also storing some parked outside on the street. Next slide. Go to DPW.
Yeah. All right. So, just another kind of common theme that we heard is just some kind of overnight accommodation or bunk or cot area, like heard Raina talk about for IVAC. That was a common theme in all of the departments, for emergencies, for standby situations or extended shifts. DPW is similar, and in that respect, also just gender separated spaces for restrooms, showers, lockers, etc., so that we ensure that we have the opportunity to employ male and female officers and volunteers. So DPW, they appreciate the central location in the village, but at the same time, I think described challenges, another common theme, but particular challenges they have moving a lot of heavy equipment in an area near the train station, which has increasing amounts of pedestrian traffic. And, they are managing the safety issues there. But, that's not what you would do. If you had a choice, you would, locate DPW in a sort of a less congested area, that's more isolated from public traffic. And, they helped, they created a sidewalk on their side of the street to make it easier for people to walk and have separation from vehicles. And they just carefully managed the movement of all the vehicles. We were at the Ardsley DPW today, and their yard is completely internal, so the vehicles can all move kind of safely in a protected area, which obviously would be preferred. We know the site is subject to flooding and would need new drainage infrastructure to address that, whether they stay there or for anything that may go there. We also, I think the village has recognized that this site is in a valuable area for economic development, housing, and other things, perhaps in the future as part of a transit-oriented district. So I think we heard from DPW that they're comfortable being in different locations with a facility that just addresses the space and operational needs that they have. So if you go to the next slide, this is kind of a layout. This was the former sewage treatment plant that then was added to and adapted over the years. And so things are kind of shoehorned into this space to make them fit. But that creates some conflicts, that creates some traffic, truck maneuvering issues and space limitations. The salt shed is nearby but remote. Next. Just overall admin office space, lockers, gender separated spaces, showers for decontamination, lounge, training, etc. These are all just older spaces that have had a lot of wear and tear and should be modernized and properly sized. Next. You can see the sanitation truck kind of like wedged under the front of it, like wedged under that overhang there. Again, the buildings are just too small for this current size of vehicle. They were designed at a time when the vehicles were smaller. Central garage is the same. You can see the Ardsley DPW facility at the bottom with kind of like much larger, more open spaces with higher ceilings and clearances that allow them to just store and maneuver all of these vehicles in a safe manner. And, there is offsite storage. There's the salt shed. There's the transfer yard. There are a lot of additional needs. So I think one thing just to recognize with DPW is that certain things can be separated from the main facility if we have space limitations, and we need to think of this as like a puzzle pieces of different sizes that we can work with, and we'll work with the department to sort of understand how those pieces need to be combined. Thanks.
All right, so moving just a couple more, and then we'll on to the next part of our agenda. But just to cover, so village admin, obviously this building and the Justice Court where we are sitting in one of our most iconic buildings in town, but that also comes with some challenges in the layout. If you go to the next slide, Charles. Sorry, you're in the hot seat of slide advancing. Here's the layout. As you have already seen, the fire department is in the lower level, and then we have police in the lower level, and then the village admin occupy that main level, and above is the theater. If you go to the next slide. So the building itself is not accessible. There is no elevator. There was plans at some point to put an elevator actually in that door on the left that you see, or a lift, but that wasn't done. So, as a public facing, departments, it is important that there be some kind of reception area with ADA accessible entry so that people can actually access the services quite well. And of course, this room that we're in right now, there's no weatherization vestibule. The entry itself is, somewhat blocked by the police cars. So again, not a great, not what you would do if you were doing it from scratch. Go to the next slide. Office spaces, like you heard, everyone's making it work, but there are some staff that don't have workspaces. There are also don't have a private meeting room. So for confidential conversations like about HR issues or other, actually sure where they go, but they don't have, they have that table that is sort of outside in the main, main lobby area. They also don't have a kind of Zoom hybrid option for their tech. And then next is our last department here, Recreation and Parks. They're in, of course, this semi-historic church, and very accessible location on Main Street. I think they enjoy being near, walkable distance to the school. But if you go to the next slide, there's just, the building is old and tired and and somewhat aged. So a lot of the infrastructure is outdated. They could really benefit from more of a kitchen that they would use with some of their programming. If you go to the next slide, you'll see some photos of that main program space. Is quite good because it's a good size. It's very multifunctional, but similarly to most of the other buildings we've talked about, there's no accessible entrance. So for seniors or anyone with a stroller or anything on wheels, the entry is very, very difficult. And so, we'll be looking at all the options of, staying here and or relocating. They do have synergies with other programs in town, like the senior center. So we'll be looking at all of this. With that, I think we'll just go to our next.
It was a fast tour of the Irvington Village facilities. We missed a lot of details, but hopefully we hit the high notes there. So we did have our public survey in December and January. 445 respondents, which is terrific. The goals of this was not to ask people to make decisions related to this plan. It's way too early for that. It's just to introduce this plan to the community, learn a little bit about the people who responded and just about how do these facilities, figure in their lives generally, and how aware are they of them. So that ends. Next. We had most people were Irvington residents, a mix of homeowners and renters, a few business owners and people with other affiliations, and a good mix of age groups and also just duration of how long people have lived in the village.
So the next topic we asked in the surveys about your impressions of Irvington. So this is like what we asked people about, like use 3 words to describe what you love about Irvington. So here are like some key recurring words. So we heard like the people like the Irvington as community. It's small, it's friendly, it's by the river. Again, those are like the favorite qualities of the village. And we do want to keep that in mind and try to maintain those qualities throughout the whole facility planning process. To the next one. So we asked about what's the top kind of 3 priorities or challenges for Irvington overall as a community. So here again, some recurring kind of topics: taxes, cost of living. There are concerns on housing affordability and housing diversity. People are like one that has the desire to maintain this kind of small town character, this kind of historic charm, and also like that kind of ties to the quality of life. And there is kind of the desire to kind of make Main Street kind of the Main Street kind of vitalization to support more kind of diverse local businesses. And also there's concerns again on infrastructure, facilities, and also public services. If you go to the next one. So here is a heat map, like showing all the favorite places people have in Irvington. So again, it's like with the waterfront park, the aqueduct trail are all kind of like very popular destinations. Irvington Woods is like a very nice, unique, natural asset for the village. Go to the next one, please. So we also asked people about their experience of the Main Street. So obviously Main Street is a very kind of popular major kind of destination for the residents. People go there to shop and go dining there, and also to go to the train station and other purposes.
So this is a little bit about kind of how do people experience our municipal facilities. And we got quite a lot of people who either work or volunteer at our facilities, which was really exciting to see that, just the level of participation from people who, go there on a daily basis and give their time and energy to, to the village. And just quite a few representatives of all the different departments responded to our survey, and so people are thinking about this plan and they're involved, which is terrific. Next. And then, for everyone who does not work or for everyone, how often do they actually visit each of our facilities? So I think it's as you would expect, but I also just kind of a, representation that almost everybody who responded has been to any one of these at least once for some reason or another. Most people go to the more public ones, the library, the theater, the recreation and parks, community center, the senior center, etc. The turquoise are the people that said they'd never been to certain facilities. So we hope to bring them on tours and make them more aware of the departments that keep the village running every day. Next. People generally drive or walk, and surprisingly few complaints about how easy it was. Everybody said it's either very easy or reasonably easy to access our facilities. So although we know people are, unhappy about parking sometimes, it seems like people feel like the facilities are fairly accessible, which is a good thing. Next. Do people have other connections to these departments? So many people have interacted with the village administration for a permit or, some other reason. So, there's a lot of experience there. But really, many people have also, they recognize that they've either benefited from the work of DPW or emergency services, or a friend or family member, and they just appreciate that these departments are part of their lives. And so it's just good to see just the sort of the level of awareness and understanding that there is in the responses. Next. This is very complicated looking, but the point of this was we asked people what they think the goals for this plan should be. And of course, the first choice I think was fairly natural, which is ensure that we are making a responsible use of tax dollars in combination with other revenues and funding sources as a result of this plan. Secondly, that in doing so, we're creating a vision for efficient, modern municipal facilities that serve the needs of Irvington residents. So those are kind of the two that you might have expected to be the top two. It's always interesting to us what people put as number 3 after kind of the obvious ones. And the third choice was strengthen an active village center around Main Street, train station. So kind of just reinforces back to the questions of kind of the historic character, the feeling of Main Street, the vitality and vibrancy that Yuting was talking about, and that this is something that people feel strongly about, and they hope that this plan helps reinforce. So there's kind of an interesting piece of information there, and other priorities as well. Next. I think. Oh, go ahead.
Well,
Yeah.
we're going to wrap up here. Again, just to reiterate, so we've shared with you, the outcomes and our understanding from all of this due diligence, and some of it you may have already understood from, prior efforts. But for us, this is really about establishing, what are the facts on the ground. And, from here out, it's about looking at the different sites and working with all of you to prioritize. There are so many needs, more than we can all solve. So, how do we prioritize and understand what the trade-offs are? And so that's, the fun stuff that we will be getting into next, with everyone. And a part of, as I said in the beginning, we're sort of concluding this data gathering phase. And I think for us, the last part of that phase will be this public event on the 26th from 4 to 8. Third time we've plugged it tonight. So it will be at the library, and we'll be presenting a lot of this information, but then also with more ways for people to interact and provide more feedback, and also engage, starting to engage in the map and like what are the sites. And so that'll help us move into the next phase of planning work. So with that, we would love to answer questions and or just hear thoughts and feedback.
I want to thank you for all of your hard work. I think it's important that you've been able to engage with the different departments. I think, you know, as a village, we are aware that our, especially our, you know, fire department, police and EMS, you know, that they are in dire need of updates. So I think that's obviously clear in the work that you all did. I think it's really great that you were able to talk to all of the departments, and I think identifying what the needs are, and so that as a community we can understand, right, from the people who are working and volunteering in these different spaces. And so I think it's helpful for residents. What will you, so just about your February 26th community, just so people know what to expect, what is the engagement? Are people coming there to ask questions about the work that's been done or the needs? I think it would be helpful so that people sort of understand what that event, and will there be people from the different departments there? What's the setup?
I'm so glad you asked. Yes to all of the above. So it will be in the library, the program room that hopefully many of you are familiar with. It's a really nice room. We were just there today. It will be set up kind of as sort of exhibit style where you can, you know, visit the perimeter of the room. We'll have 6 different stations, actually 8 different stations that give you an introduction, and then 6 stations for each of the major departments, and then a kind of mapping exercise. And our whole team will be there. So the 4 of us, plus Monica, Jonathan, others on our team will be there to talk with residents. And we will also have representatives from all of the departments. So who will be there to also just talk with residents. And the idea is really that it's a community dialogue. So it's not us just saying things and people listening. It's about a conversation. So people can ask, you know, they can ask a firefighter, well, why do you need this? Or how does that work? Or why can't you just get a smaller truck? Or, you know, anything, right? So this is about all of us coming to an understanding about what is really important for the village to do its work, you know, in the best way possible with a responsible use of taxpayer money and keeping the charm and future proofing for, you know, for what things in to come.
And just one other sort of point about how it's organized is it's a drop-in. So it's a 4-hour period. And like Raina said, there are stations. It's kind of like a science fair. You kind of make your way around and there you talk to different people at each booth, kind of a situation. And the idea of that is that it's the one-on-one interaction that people can have with the team and with village representatives and department representatives. And B, the 4 hours just allows people to come at their convenience, you know, in the late afternoon, evening, when they're on their commute home, and it's sort of easy for them so they don't have to make it a certain time, which we find for this type of event just limits the number of people who are able to participate. So it just will help, you know, maximize the involvement. Yeah.
And will you be sort of collecting data or
Yes. Yeah.
how does that portion?
So we will have, every station will have sort of questions for people to respond to, either, you know, sticky notes or dots or like other ways that record people's input. And then we also have notepads where we're noting every conversation that we have, like what did people ask us? You know, what were the conversations about? And then we take all of that and we document it and synthesize it and analyze it after the event. So it's sort of similar to what we did with the survey. This is sort of like an analog version of that then becomes digital. So every conversation that we're having with people becomes part of, you know, our understanding of what, you know, of the project.
And since we're asking sort of our, you know, some of our staff and volunteers to be there, what's the expectation of them? Because if I were there, I'd be like, I'm writing what, I'm doing what, or you guys will be doing.
Our team
right?
will do
Okay.
that stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
The department heads and, you know, staff, just if they can, you know, just show up and talk to people and represent, you know, what they know, and, you know, help foster the conversation. But we'll do the, you know, the recording and all. Yeah. And looks like we may have some cookies at the event.
Yep.
Care of Charles.
Yep.
So there'll be
you-
food.
And you'll also be able to direct people to someone who can answer their questions. So a lot of times somebody comes up to you and says, I want to know about the flooding. And so you'll say, Ray's right over there on the other side of the room. Go talk to Ray. Yeah.
Geography or wetlands,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
What are the next steps in the timeline after this community event?
After the community event, we'll be spending the next, let's say, several weeks starting to do understanding the sites themselves. So this first few weeks or several weeks was understanding the departments and like kind of like the functions and the spaces. Then the other half of the puzzle is like the sites themselves. And so it's, you know, understanding the topography, understanding the vehicular access, understanding the context around, are there houses nearby, you know, so that we can understand, kind of do like a pros and cons evaluation of like, okay, well, this would fit here, but it has these issues. This definitely won't fit there. And it's just sort of all scenarios are on the table. You know, this is the moment where there's really no bad ideas and everything just needs to be considered and evaluated. And that will take us, don't quote me on this because I don't have the schedule in front of me, but you know, through March-ish into April, and when we'll be doing a second or actually a third community event where we're going to work together with community members on actual sort of on the scenarios themselves in some way. So that'll be sort of the next phase. And then out of that, then hopefully we're starting to understand, okay, well, we started out with 35 different options and now we're narrowing down. Now we have 10. And, you know, then we'll narrow over the rest of the spring through additional engagement. Sure.
One way to think of it is this upcoming event, February 26th, is kind of like giving people an understanding of all the puzzle pieces. And then the subsequent event after that will be asking people to actually now like grapple with trying to put together the puzzle in different ways and understand, you know, the advantages and disadvantages of those and sort of like see the challenges and opportunities in themselves and in group discussions, basically, in an interactive way. Yeah.
What do you foresee sort of the timeline being from sort of the end of this process to where we might see facilities? What does that look like? Because I think that's hard for the public to kind of visualize.
I mean, I think actually we would ask Charles to answer that one, just because that's more about how the village procures and, you know.
So, I mean, ultimately, this plan is going to present data. It's not going to present recommendations. It's going to defer to the community to decide where it makes sense to put facilities, if we're going to expand certain ones, if we're going to move them, potentially reorient how they're laid out. But we're also going to have to figure out the financing for this. You know, this is going to be a large project, so we're, you know, to do everything, we're going to have to break it up into pieces, prioritize it, and ultimately that will be a community and board-driven conversation where we all work collaboratively to figure out how to move forward.
And there, if I can just add, it may also be a phased implementation, right? There may be like,
Right.
you know, the first project has to be X because that unlocks other
Right.
things, and then
Right.
there's a phase 2. So
Yeah, that's a good
could
point.
be
This is a
yeah.
comprehensive plan, which is long-term in nature, but it is also going to hopefully identify what the first steps are, and you know, then what makes other things possible, as Ryan was saying.
So in your presentation, obviously, not surprisingly, taxes and cost is sort of a real driver for communities. How will this work enable us to sort of think about financing and unlocking opportunities, right, for either grant funding or for specific programs that might, you know, we might be able to get money in exchange if we do housing? Like, will you all sort of help? You know, how does, because we've talked about this before, so I'm just wanting to sort of bring out this point, but obviously we care lots in this community, as expected, came out #1. So, you know, and I know you've done other projects, so how can you help us think about how to finance long-term and what the opportunities are for financing other than just tax dollars?
Yes, great question. Very important one. I think the first step of that is that we come up with options to discuss that are, you know, the most cost effective for whatever sources of funding. So that's why we're looking very carefully at these program needs. We're going to be looking very carefully at the constraints of different sites from a cost perspective, comparing different options from a cost perspective. So the cost estimating during the last phase of this is going to be very important, to kind of providing a baseline of, where can we gain the most efficiencies and really create the most cost effective solutions. And I think that is going to help the community also prioritize, like, which needs are absolute must-haves and where are we willing to make trade-offs, because then we can find something that balances costs, site requirements, program needs and standards and so forth. And so I think that's kind of the way we'll set up the analysis for discussion. Then from the perspective of funding, yes, funding through village revenue is one, is one option. We are going to look at grant opportunities as well. I think we're going to look at infrastructure and site conditions. Ray, you may want to speak to this a little bit. And then I think, we will look at opportunities to gain revenue from, for example, from land sale or lease. So just to give an example that we're familiar with, in Pelham, it's a little bit of a different community. They had a parking lot, sold it to a private developer who built a private housing development. And then as part of that project, they were able to get funding to build a combined public safety building directly across the street. In that case, it's a different community. We don't know what the opportunities will be here, but we know, for example, the DPW site is a potential housing opportunity, and could be, if we can find an alternative for DPW, that might create, the ability to gain some revenue that can then, be on the, the other side of the ledger. So I think we'll be looking at a lot of options for funding and not assuming one or another necessarily.
Yeah, and the options for funding we'll look at the site's proper. Some of the sites will be challenged regarding topography, slope, wetlands, floodplain, other issues. We're going to study all those sites. We visited all those sites already, identified some kind of constraints with respect to those sites, some opportunities with respect to those sites as well, and we'll test those sites going down the line, taking the puzzle pieces as Raina and Neil had mentioned, popping on each of the sites and seeing what kind of impacts they may have with respect to development costs, so we can put together the most cost-effective design possibly for the village.
Any other questions? Comments, thoughts? No? Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank you.
hosting us.
February 26th.
48.
There will be fresh posters around town soon.
A lot of posters.
Yeah.
Take care, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
You get to see it. Take care, be well. Actually, I was telling you, my phone was pretty fast.
Okay.
Honestly, yeah.
I know.
See you. Yes,
I know we can't cover everything, right?
And if you did, I'll be saying something else right now.
Yeah, right.
I have those. Oh, sorry.
Oh, great.
Take care, take care. I tell him, I thought that was very bad. It was bad, yes.
So our next item is professional fees for the ARB.
Hi.
Hi.
How you guys doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So I just wanted to cover why we're here. I think most of you know, but we haven't had an architect for a while on the ARB. The ARB does design reviews. So we're all volunteers like you guys are. We're not architects, we're not designers. We're just residents. So it is great to have an architect on this. We have had a question about the fees. So this will be a new fee, but the way we're looking at it is that it is the first step in streamlining towards moving some of the residential applications out of planning. So once we beef up the board with the architect, he will help us get up to speed, get trained. That board will be ready for the big move. And that move will be very large savings for renovations. I think some of you guys have gone through it. But just to remind you, the proposal was that residential renovations would no longer go to planning, so they go directly ARB. The stuff like site planning review, if it's required, the view preservation, all this stuff will be done between the applicant and the building inspector, working with the same consultants, but instead of going to meetings for months on end, this will just go on offline, and then they'll come to the ARB for a complete design review, which would be things that we're not doing at this point, which is the height, massing. We would look at the plant and landscape architecture if we need to, but it would be one stop for all design items. So.
I think also just to take a step back, a big part of the issue that came from streamlining is that there's a requirement in our code to have an architect on
Yes.
the ARB, which we've been aware of, but we've had conflicts with people not finding an architect. So part of this, and this is part of streamlining, which is going to be also to amend the code so that we have the option to have a hired architect on there, and also to allow for the fees, because this was an issue that we were aware of, but obviously was highlighted during streamlining. So this is part of that and sort of the first step in sort of dealing with that issue, right?
So that's all I have. I'm just here to answer questions, really. No presentation.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together, Andy. Yeah, thanks for coming here. I mean, I think again, it makes total sense. Have an architect on board and part of the streamlining process. The one thing I'm wondering is, like, I think the way Marion's drafted the law is that, you know, you have the option to consult an architect or to bring one in. And just wondering, like, for some of these smaller things, for example, like a fence change, or maybe someone needs to replace a window. Like, do you think that's the case where we need an architect? I'm just a little worried about charging someone, like, you know, they have to replace a window, now another fee on them, you know, versus, like, is it something that the ARB is handling already with architect? Like, do we need to add them for smaller changes like this?
Right, that's a good point. So the way I look at it is that the architect would be consulted for, like, the first, like, set of windows that come through. He would guide us on what the materials are, what the levels are, what we should be accepting, what we should be pushing applicants into. There's been a lot of material changes in decking, fencing, and things like that, and we're just kind of winging it. So he would bring us up to speed, and then afterwards, we would call him in for fences after we get a good handle on it. So.
Are there other, I mean, and just even in the interim training, I mean, that we should be given, that the ARB we should be providing the ARB additional training, it sounds like, even now.
Well, I certainly think the training you guys went to, if that comes up again, we should do that. But I don't know what kind of training we do for design. That would be an interesting course to look at.
Yeah, that's a good point, guys. I wonder if, I mean, I'm not sure how we structure things in terms of, like I think what you're saying makes total sense, Randy. Like, but I wonder if we could do that out of the fee for some of the, like, not as part of the fee, because it's like the first 10 people that have to do a window change get charged, and then the next 10 people don't. Doesn't seem like a fair process, you know what I mean? But like what you're saying makes total sense is like, we need to kind of get up to speed and like, you know, learn from the architect for these specific things, and then we don't need it long term. I just wonder if we can structure things so that we don't have to charge the first 10 people and we fund that a different way. You know?
Right. Well, yeah. I don't know how to. Yeah,
Right, yeah.
Can we do this offline? Can we do training? Yeah, that would be a good way to do it. What I do see is when an application comes in and they say, you know, we want to do whatever it is, AZAC fencing or something, and none of us, we have no idea what that is. At that point, we have to call somebody in.
Right.
Say, you know, is it something that's just gonna, you know, turn green next year, and or is this good material? We don't know.
It's great. I have it in my indoor.
Yeah. We've seen a lot now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, that makes total sense.
It's- yeah, it's very weather, it's really great. For
No, that makes sense. It just makes me think like, yeah, maybe there's a way to charge differently for those things versus
Right.
like, you know, the larger renovations and stuff like that, where like it makes sense that it should be part of the fee because all the time is going to this one project versus like, you know, this seems a little different for some of these other material questions or learning about new materials, but I mean, the need makes sense. You know?
So as far as billing, I'm not sure how would we start off with this, because yeah, there is some issues like that. We're going to be getting up to speed, so yes, the applicant should be paying for that. You mentioned maybe there might be a period where it's covered by the village, and then we go into start charging. I don't certain options.
I think it depends on how we set it up. If, you know, if we budget money towards contractual expense, so for example, for the village attorney to come and assist me with things, that would be money that would be charged to that line, not to the applicant, even if I'm talking to her about something related to a specific property or property owner. I think the idea is that could potentially just be something that would be funded by the general fund, but then slowly working through a process whereby if an application goes before the ARB and if the architect is brought in, fee would be appropriated as needed only by the chair. So it wouldn't be all the members would request something of the architect. It would be something referred to the architect by the chair in consultation with the building department. That's kind of how I see it to mitigate that.
Right, which sort of happens now, right, with the planning board?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like my understanding is, and Ed's in the room, maybe you can clarify, that in general, you know, obviously certain things get referred to our engineers, consultant engineers, landscape architects, and then the village council. It's not everything. So, you know, yeah, we have to be judicious about it.
There would be a difference between like larger renovation projects,
Yes.
which we would always need someone, and that would be a fee probably.
Yeah. And it's going to depend on the quality of the plan that's before the committee. If it's a plan that's not well thought out, price might have been cheaper to the resident contracting with their architect, but when it gets through the ARB, they identify umpteen different issues. That's going to start to add up as far as fees go.
Yeah, I guess we're just concerned about like making the fees as like transparent and predictable as possible.
Yeah.
You know, so that's something I think we should figure out how to do that.
And I think it's important because we've had some of this conversation about it being, again, I think the referral piece is important, right? Where it's sort of, you know, there's this learning curve, which I think we need to deal with and think about training. And then there's the more specific, you need an expert, just like the planning board might need, right? From different experts. So I think that is chargeable to the applicant.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that makes sense. Again, we all know that everyone is very sensitive to fees, understandably, right? Yeah.
Just so I understand, Randy. So like, I'm just trying to understand like which would be kind of as needed. And like what you're saying makes total sense because like you said, I mean, materials are changing all the time nowadays. But like, so for residential renovations, I guess the things that you have in your here, like maybe an hour or less, those would be ones that would be like kind of as needed, or like how would you think about the breakdown of like we always need them for these types of projects versus, you know, it's more of a technical materials questions that come up from time to time?
Well, certainly on the larger commercial institutional projects, we always need it for that. Those are big packets to go through. And then new house development, yes.
Right.
On residential renovations, yes, it depends.
Right.
You know, sometimes we see stuff that we've never seen before. Sometimes we have questions on design that we like an expert to look at, and then sometimes it's just a dormer. Really don't need an expert to look at it. So it is kind of as needed, except for the first two
Always
categories. So I did put, yeah, the small ones I put time in there, but I think this is more of like get us up to speed, and then we go. Really don't need help with that.
You're currently doing that now.
Yes.
What do you do now if you need architectural or design? You don't have.
I
access
call
to it.
friends.
Okay.
About it.
And we're gonna be considering in our next meeting, the public, we're gonna have a public, we're gonna announce a public hearing to
Yes.
consider this change,
It will
right?
be to set a public hearing
Right.
for a
Mhm.
later date to
Okay.
consider the two changes to local laws as outlined in the packet.
Okay.
One is, giving us the opportunity to utilize an architect, for the ARB, and two, to establish the fee.
So there'll be opportunities for the public to comment and give us
Right.
feedback on what they think of these fees. And this is part of the packet, right? This is,
Yes.
yeah, what Brandy put together.
The local law and the ARB chair's comments are
Okay.
included in tonight's agenda.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
For these jobs, like for the projects that are coming in now, do you have a just general idea of the percentage where you are needing to consult with someone? Like how often is it happening now?
Well, I would look at the 1 and 2, the first two categories.
Yeah.
So the first two categories, I mean, we have two very large projects that you know that are coming.
Yeah.
The new houses, we seem to be getting, Ed could probably talk to this, but you know, once every month maybe, or once every 2 months, we're getting a new house. Yeah, we've been lucky on that because we have some good architects here. The renovations, they've been pretty straightforward lately. Every once in a while, there might be a house that's historical and needs more of an expert opinion, or a contractor instead of an architect's doing work. So we need somebody with design experience to really eyeball it.
Any other questions? Oh, okay.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Thanks for putting this together too. It's really
Randy.
helpful.
Thank you. So our next item, Ed, you're up, is our building department budget workshop.
Got the matrix nobody can read.
Oh, yeah.
I'll email it out tomorrow. So this goes by calendar year, remember that, not fiscal year, so that we have the ability to judge where we are. Some highlights on the
Thank you.
outside end. So as discussed last year, we're hitting a dry spell with extraordinary projects. We don't have that large projects coming in. Toll Brothers is finishing up. They did 27 permits in the fiscal year, and we had 5 single-family homes. So what we do is we take those out in our estimate, and that's how we've been doing our estimate. We have 2 in the queue now, fiscal year 26. One more we know we're going to get. So what we did is we just took $10,000 per dwelling off of our estimated value. And it's a significant drop in our estimated revenue for next year. That is pretty drastic. So if you have any questions before we move to the budget, this is pretty standard. Everything's running about average. Really, the only thing that's hurting us is the lack of new homes or larger homes.
So I guess you can't really predict outside of what we know about and,
Yeah, we'll take out, I'm not looking at economy, I'm looking at what we know.
right.
Trying not to forecast great economy. I'm not trying to forecast a bad economy. I'm trying to look at, we have years of data here, take the data, and for years we've been doing this way. We've been pretty close, except for every once in a while we've never really didn't make projections, except in 08 or 09, I think it was. But what we have been is been very conservative with our number, cautious not to, because I think that'd be a bigger problem if we didn't make revenues. But there's always a project that may come in. But we don't see it right now, can't guess it. And remember, it's for the calendar year, so we don't have that extra 6 months, 5 months there.
Are you gonna take us through this or summarize
So the
it, or-
first,
yeah.
so the first line that Ed was kind of just going over now is the building permit revenue line. So in the current 25-26 year budget, the estimated revenues for the building permits are 605,000. And then the projected revenues for the 26-27 year are 400,000. So that's a decrease in building permit revenues of 205,000. So that's that covers the revenue piece.
Sure.
Yes. All right. So then if we move on to the expenses, the personnel services line, this 14,730 increase is just reflective of the current salaries now. And there is a request to establish a 15,000 overtime line. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yes. So presently we don't have an overtime line item, and we do it with comp time. In other words, if you work an hour, you get an hour. Counter traffic has increased quite a bit, and we're not staffed well enough anymore to give the staff comp time. I'm a salary employee, so I do all the board meetings, I do all the after-hour meetings, I do all the call-ins. So what's happening is we're now running out of people to handle the people coming in during the counter and getting a backlog, especially of the assisting of the people before the applications come in. That's going to cause a ripple effect of more consultant fees or applications coming in, that kind of thing. So we feel that small overtime budget of a little less than 10 hours a month would cover it. That's for the two assistant building inspectors. Sarah's time is different. We need Sarah is because the projects are getting bigger and she can't get all the work done, especially the planning board with the two big projects. Right now, the first big project. We're getting a lot of calls for the second project, but it's not too much of a burden for us. So that's why Sarah was also included in the overtime budget. It also benefits future growth of the building department because we have no cross training right now. I'm doing all the boards because of the overtime issue and not having a budget for it in the past. So that's the request.
Will will some of the assistant building inspectors then, one or two of them attend? Or that's the idea?
That's the idea. So right now, because of the microphone problems, we've been having one of the inspectors stay home and text us when there's a problem and someone's not speaking. And if you watch the meeting, you'll see that I ask people to speak up. That's because we're receiving that text. Then we have the other buildings. We also have them working the day before the meeting, trying to get all the paperwork organized, get it in. We're averaging 6 hours of comp time right now on for those two people. Okay, and Sarah's a different issue. She's actually putting in a lot of comp time, probably 6 hours herself.
guess one, I mean, makes sense. I guess one question around this, just if people have questions, is like 100K less revenue coming in, but we have like bigger workload this year. But I'm assuming that's because it's less bigger projects which generate the revenue, and there are more smaller projects which don't generate the revenue.
So,
Is that the?
so if you look at and that's a good question, but if you look at the board meetings, you see that they didn't really change very much. The Toll Brothers was a unique property, 27 units, one A or B meeting, one building permit, really. You know, the permits came in for individual lots, but they were reviewed already. So yes and no.
How do we get more of those?
I think you guys are working on that. That's not a building department issue. But that actually takes more work, as much work as a small home individual. So 76 North Broadway, not to bring up one project, probably burdens the building department 4 days a month, except for maybe someone going out in the field and answering the phone calls. It's a full court press. We get 9, the last 2 planning board day meetings, we got 9 letters that had to be read, analyzed, and distributed to the board members before 7 o'clock. We're almost to the point where we want to tell the residents we didn't read it, see you next month, but that's not fair either.
Makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
I actually invite someone on Monday, or not this month, February's always slow, a Monday or a planning board meeting, or to stop in the office in the morning. They're lined up.
Yeah, speaking of office visits, I know last year you were able to provide us with, looking at it now, like kind of just a representative of counter traffic, phone calls and inspections. Do you have any data from this year?
We don't track that. That data was extremely burdensome to do, but we did it because you wanted it. We can do it again if you want, but it's not in February. Just outline exactly what you're looking for, because it's so many little things going on.
Yeah. No, I don't want to create a burden. I just wondered if you were still tracking.
No, that was a one-off. But if, like I said, if you guys want that, we can take a couple weeks to do that.
Okay. The part-time labor line, so this was newly added in the current 25-26 budget. It's for a part-time clerk who's currently working 17.5 hours per week. So that comes to $22,750. So that line item is reflective of that. The equipment line, the request is to purchase a additional tablet. The existing tablet is 6 years old and being shared between the 2 sectors. And then the next 2 lines are items that are included in the current year budget, were purchased and don't need to be purchased again next year. That's $1,300 in code books and $400 in trainings that were completed this year, assuming they're not annual trainings.
It's 5-year training, and this year the energy code and the new codes came out that are actually, we're still going to training. We still have a little more training to do this fiscal year. Every 5 years, actually, it's supposed to be every 5 years. Every 5 years, the building inspectors have to get recertified code. And this past year, they not only revamped the code, but they re-indexed it on top of everything else, so nothing's where it was. So not only did they make all the energy code changes, but we had to buy all the books. You couldn't use the old books. For the last 4 years, we've been using old books and buying a supplement here or there. So this year, $1,200 in books alone. The disc was $400. So it added up. But we don't need it for 4 more years, so we're not going to leave it in the budget.
And the last line here is the rental and maintenance of office equipment. So this is the annual software fee, which over the past 3 years was covered by a grant. That's now up, so the village has to incur the cost. So this current year, it was $15,000. So we built in a bit of an increase. The range given was between $15,000 and $18,000.
Yeah, I have a 2:30 update on that. So I
Okay.
haven't been able to.
Okay, yeah, go
It's going to be
ahead.
16,000
16,000.
for the 2026, 27 year.
Okay, all right, so
Okay.
we'll adjust,
Yeah.
15,000.
But that was that was 2:30, 3 o'clock today. Finally
Okay.
got that. All right, the proposal's coming.
Okay, all right, so I'll update, that number to the 16,000.
Just to clarify, that's the cloud permit software.
That's the cloud permit software. Yeah, we're in negotiation. We had a terrible time with the start 4 years ago. So we were in dispute over the payment for 4 years for the first year's payment. So that's why we're still in negotiations. Basically, we're going to get a year free out, not a free, get a year free out, but we're done.
So then the net, impact of all these changes, adjusting for the extra 250 on the, cloud permit line is a net increase to the tax levy of $248,780.
And what's the 2%, 200,000?
As of last meeting, yeah, it was about 200,000.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Want to guess what this is?
What is that?
Charles had asked us to revamp the website. This is actually double-sided, 450 pages, 70 documents. Revamp that, individualize all permits needed, and give step-by-step instructions for everything from addition to offense, with attachments and links. So all we're waiting for now is Charles and I to sit down with the web designer to help us present it in a better manner than our website gives today.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
It's actually 3 months for Charles.
Ed worked on this a long time. What in essence what it will do from my standpoint is it will change the layout of the building department's website from like a index file format type where you've got to click a folder, then click another folder, then click another folder to dive down deeper. It's changing it into more of a view document where you'll see pages off of it and you'll click on links rather than navigating through a file directory. It's just going to visually be more useful, and it will be more, hopefully be more simple.
So what it won't do is show you in all total 110 documents. You have to figure out which ones you want. You'll start with a title page, hopefully, and then it'll go to generalization of permits, and then it'll follow the permits within all our documents will line up. And then from there you can pick, give an individual, say you want to do a window, like windows are bad. We have 4 different window code cards. Let's say you want to do a elevation change, you want to add a window. That's easier. It'll tell you, go to this page, and it'll give you a brief description, and it'll tell you just the documents you need for that window change. So you don't have to go through 110 documents to find which ones you want. It'll tell you which ones to do. We did that for 70 projects.
Amazing. Streamlining at work.
It reflected a tremendous amount of hours.
No, that's right. I
But
mean,
we
I
wanted
think
to
it's-
do it, and it was just a matter of, really, it's the website that's really causing the bigger burden. It's just difficult to find it. Charles has made some changes that helped it a little bit, but it's still, at the end of the day, you don't know what you're looking for. It's hard to find.
But I think it's the point about that is that I think the building department is working and, to try to streamline the process so that, the residents can do it, because it is not easy, right? So
Yeah, well,
we appreciate
it's
the
the
work that
codes
you
that
put
are
into
kind
it.
of need a lot of work.
Working on that too.
Yes.
Well, and with the website, maybe that could reduce too the amount of like phone calls, counter questions. If things are clearer
Yeah.
for residents.
Oh,
you
everything,
might-
every one thing is a hope.
See?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to fire. No, it's IVAC next.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
IVAC?
Good evening. Well, do a quick quick round of introductions, and then we'll jump
That's a
into
great
our
idea.
presentation. So Lucas Isola, I joined IVAC actually in 2003 as a high school member. Grew up in Irvington. I'm an Irvington high school grad. I rejoined 3 years ago. I'm now the chief officer of the organization and the Irvington School District.
Oh, I thought you were going to introduce
Oh,
me. Okay, I'm Dave Braygill. I'm a volunteer at IVAC. I'm part of the Irvington diaspora. I lived here for years ago in California, but now I live in Scarsdale, actually Edgemont. But I love Irvington so much that I took my EMT class at Irvington. And I've been here for 6 years volunteering. I'm also a paramedic. So it's been 24 hours a week across the street.
Yeah, Max Carpenter. My wife and I moved up on Mountain Road about 2 years ago. And I had the opportunity to join IVAC just over a year ago and became an EMT through the program there, and subsequently have become second lieutenant.
Okay. So I'm just going to give a quick summary of IVAC. I mean, there may be some folks who don't know how we operate. Just some quick operating statistics, some recent improvements and work we're doing in the community, and then we'll just review our economics and then we'll take questions from there. So IVAC, or 501c3, established in 1963, and we've been serving without interruption 911 ambulance service to the village ever since. Starting with the 2024 budget year, we received financial support from the village to address budget shortfalls in the face of increased operating costs. So our agency provides 24/7 coverage to the village with our 3 ambulances and 2 first response vehicles. Our agency is currently enrolled in a number of pilot programs and advanced protocols. So those bring treatments and diagnostic capabilities that are above and beyond the basic life support that is common for most other Westchester volunteer ambulance corps, sometimes known as VACs. It goes without stating, but 911 ambulance service is something the village needs 24/7 with high quality, regardless of the quantity of 911 calls. So we're a standby service, similar to the fire department. You hope a house never burns up. You hope there's never a cardiac arrest, but if one is to occur, you need readiness. So some quick overview of our operations. We operate 12-hour shifts starting at 7 a.m., and that's in alignment with Irvington Police. In the time since we've received Irvington Village support, we've had no 12-hour shifts without ambulance coverage. And that is something that cannot be said of prior performance. The majority of calls, about 60+%, are attended to and care is led by our volunteer EMTs. Volunteers in the last calendar year have contributed 7,000 hours of coverage to the community, almost exclusively in the building at standby in a state of readiness. So that makes a huge impact financially. In the village proper, in the village borders, we responded to more than 300 emergencies with an average response time of 5 minutes, 25 seconds. And nearly half of those responses had a response time of less than 5 minutes, which is a golden standard in the cardiac arrest chain of survival. So ensuring cardiac arrest patients, other critically ill patients, survive without brain damage. Quick word on a few recent improvements. In the past year and a half, through a lot of concerted efforts that Maxwell will go over briefly, our volunteer headcount has grown 4x. So big jump. Most of that is attributed to improved equipment, better facilities, and targeted recruitment efforts. IVAC also restarted its high school program, something that was important and well celebrated in its past, and was an excellent way to engage with the community and school district. Since then, we've seen about 10 or so high school students join who are contributing hundreds of hours per month in the building, helping with readiness, learning emergency medical care, providing service back to the community where they live.
Going on calls.
And going on calls. Yeah.
We have high school students going on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A few other things. So IVAC, we now provide advanced life support, which again is above the level that most other Westchester VACs provide. Specifically, IVAC is the only Rivertown's EMS service that provides this higher level of care. In the past 4 years, we've managed to secure a number of grants from various sources, state, private, etc., for capital requirements. This is critical because we've been able to update life-saving medical equipment, purchase new ambulances that let us give better care, better treatments to residents, and alleviate taxpayer burdens for funding those capital improvements. By virtue of being a volunteer nonprofit, it opens a number of avenues for funding that others can't access. So a few additional things. So we provided free CPR and Narcan training. That's a medication that's used to help deal with opiate overdoses. We provided that to the Parks and Rec, Irvington Police Department, Parks and Rec summer camp instructors, staff, Irvington High School students, and even to members of the public, all free of charge. And a quick last word, there's a 2023 report by the New York State Department of Health, sort of titled The Future of EMS, and calls out about 24 important requirements that state, counties, villages, and EMS agencies should enact to ensure sustainability, financial success. We've implemented 5 of those out of the 10 or so that apply to EMS agencies. The others apply to the state, to the counties, etc. A quick word on partnership efforts. I think in prior discussions with other boards, prior mayors, I think it was very clear that a number of opportunities exist, from something as small as sharing resources or training costs, all the way up to perhaps partnering operations to help realize some economies of scale. We've worked for 23 months in discussion with 3 of our nearest VACs to either coordinate resources, share costs, or consolidate portions of our operations. One of those VACs we have currently active resource sharing with. We respond to each other's calls. We help provide coverage to each other. We do some joint trainings. Our organization has been proactive, open to the cultural idea of combining operations or doing some sort of partnership. 2 of the agencies, we made good faith efforts. We had solid timelines that were measured in months that we tried to achieve. But it was clear that those organizations were not culturally prepared. They were not ready to consider partnership opportunities, find cost-saving opportunities, perhaps because they didn't have the leadership that was prepared, or they didn't have whatever. So just taking a quick step back, we're continuing to talk across the river towns. We're looking for opportunities to get involved with them, find the economies of scale. But in the meantime, we're ensuring our own readiness for our own residents to ensure that these taxpayers, the people who attend the school district, are ready and have the service that they need. You have as an attachment our income statement for the calendar year ending December 31st. We had an operating income loss of $119,000 when accounting the past support from the village. We were essentially at break even within 0.5% of our operating expenses to what we ended with on a cash basis. We're continuing to diversify and increase our revenue streams. So our costs went up a lot in 25, but we also increased our level of service, which grants us more insurance reimbursements. We've been doing courtesy transports to residents, which at times are billable to insurance. In the coming year, we expect maybe a single-digit percentage increase in our insurance costs, which is one of our biggest expense line items. And so as a result, we're requesting the same level of support as last year. We believe that we can continue to maintain our diverse revenue stream. We expect that call volume should remain relatively the same. So in short, we demonstrated pretty clearly that we're committed to increasing volunteerism. We've been working to reduce costs where possible and minimizing the taxpayer burden. And we're going to continue on that front. We don't see village support as alleviating us of that fiscal responsibility. To the extent that we can continue pushing to diversify revenue, find cost sharing with neighbors, we will do so to reduce the taxpayer burden. So we don't see this as a handout, if you will. David, I think, is just going to walk you through a little bit of our economics, how we function. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't highlight that. Just going to the income statement. So we have been lucky to purchase our cardiac monitors, our powered stretchers, which are all $20,000-$40,000 items, and our ambulances via grants. If you take into account the depreciation of those items, whose lifespan is approximately 10 years, we did end at a loss of about $43,000. Our hope and our expectation from the past, assuming the federal and state governments continue their prior support, we should be able to secure grants in 10 years for those same items. But just something to keep.
Yeah, I think I'll start by just recalling the structure of the support that we have here. It was calculated to pay us an amount for each shift we staff fully, giving us the incentive to staff 24/7 every shift, 52 weeks a year. And we were able to achieve that. But if we don't achieve that under the structure of that contract, the amount of the support from the village is reduced. So the incentives are put on us to find a way to maintain 24/7 coverage. Just on a flat, because that was I think, a unique feature of the way we structured support for the village, reflecting our commitment to the village to provide a level of support. I want to emphasize something Lucas said. EMS is a standby services like the fire department, and the cost to maintain 24/7 readiness to respond to emergencies is fixed. It's independent of call volume. We have that cost whether or not we get a call. We may be able to predict with some measure of accuracy the number of calls that may come in just because of historical standards, but it is variable number. The revenue generated by the native Irvington call volume historically has been insufficient to cover our readiness costs.
Sorry, Dave, can you speak into the microphone a
Sure,
little bit
can.
more? Just our remote member, I think, is having trouble.
Okay, should I start back or just continue? Okay. Consequently, as I say, we continue to experience an operating shortfall, and the principal operating cost is paid EMT staff. If you look at the income statement and the operating expenses, you see HR at the top, $307,000. That's paid EMTs or drivers to staff shifts.
I think it's something people, what percentage of the shifts are staffed?
I'm about to get to that. Okay. We need to staff under DHE standards 2 essential personnel. I want to kind of put that emphasis on essential. It's an operator or driver who's qualified to drive an ambulance and an EMT. And if you can't have those, you can't put an ambulance on the road. If we add an additional person to that, we still have to have those 2, an EMT and a driver. And you can view this as 28 essential 12-hour shifts per week. Because we have 2 12-hour shifts per day. That's 2 people for each of those shifts. That's 4 per day. So 4 times 7 is 28. 28 essential 12-hour shifts per week. IVAC's able to cover 8 of these essential shifts, those 12-hour shifts, with volunteers. It's required to pay per diem EMTs for 20 of these shifts. Get to your 28. The effective cost per hour of the paid shifts is approximately $24.60. That's $307,000 from here, divided by 12 hours times 20 shifts times 52 weeks, or $24.60. For calendar year 2025, the economic value of the 8 essential shifts covered by the volunteers is $122,000. $24.60 times 12 hours shifts times 8 shifts per week times 52 weeks. Without these essential volunteer shifts, the operating deficit would have been 241 rather than 119. How does IVAC decrease this deficit? Well, it's a simple answer. Volunteer hours in essential roles. That's simple, but doesn't mean easy. As compared to 20 years ago, the expected level of a BLS EMS service has significantly increased. Current EMT certification requires 150 to 180 hours of course material, practical training, plus certification exams. And maintenance of certification requires continuing training. Paramedic certification requires 1,800 hours training. And this is not an immaterial entry barrier to having a volunteer. But beyond committing to this training, a volunteer who fills the essential role must also commit significant volunteer time, which is necessary to both develop confidence and practical competence as an EMS provider, as well as a reliable substitute for paid staff. Here and there volunteer. A here and there volunteer. Someone says, I'll give you 3 hours Wednesday.
oh, I can come in for this little period on Sunday afternoon. That is not an essential volunteer. We need the volunteer who's going to come in for 12 hours or 8 hours so that we know we don't have to hire someone to cover that 12 hours, 8 hours. That's a different kind of volunteer. So we've expanded our volunteer base significantly, and Max is going to talk a little bit about how that's the seeds to develop the essential volunteers. But just expanding it doesn't create that essential volunteer, which is going to allow us to eliminate a paid person. Because that paid person wants to know, when am I coming in, and am I coming in for a worthwhile period, and can I count on that? So that's the tension. So the here and there volunteer, it's valuable to us. It allows us to have a higher quality EMS service, that third person on the ambulance, that high school student who can now take care of the ER chart while the EMT is taking care of the patient, or take the blood pressure, who can assist in moving the patient when you need more hands. That's higher quality service, but it doesn't help us with the cost. We have to find that essential paid volunteer. I'm going to turn it over to Max. Max is going to talk a little bit about how we're trying to improve and have improved our volunteerism.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Hopefully this comes through. So yeah, I mean, I think from a practical standpoint, what I want to try to do is give you guys more context to fully understand how this is working, right? Because I think from the outside perspective, it doesn't always translate. And I think the unique perspective of moving to Irvington in the last 2 years and going through that discovery process of, number one, that EMS is not a village department, right? It's a separate nonprofit that supports the village, and understanding that my taxes are, not inherently contributing to it, but now are supporting it, and thinking through that as, a father of 2 children, and now as an IVAC volunteer. And so hopefully I can give you some of that perspective on being both sides of it, right? So like David said, he talks about 28 shifts, right? And we're able to only cover 8 of those with volunteers. I think it's really helpful to split that up almost into 2 different categories, right? So half of those shifts are daytime shifts, and half of those shifts are nighttime shifts. In terms of the daytime coverage, that's where all of our current volunteer shifts are, right? And so as a percentage of those, we're doing well, right? There's obvious room for improvement. As a percent, we have no coverage for nighttime shifts from volunteers. And that's where it's a great opportunity moving forward, but it's one of the hardest problems to solve. And to solve that, it's not just you fix one thing, right? There's tens, if not 100 little things that you need to solve for to get someone who is an EMT or a certified driver to basically say, I am willing to forego sleeping at home to sleep in a building, and do so on a volunteer basis. That criteria and that bar is different than if someone's getting paid to do so and respond, on an emergency basis. So what are those changes that need to be made, and what have we done in order to make those changes, right? And so I have some limited perspective of since I've joined. I've kind of asked Lucas and other members to give me some of their historical perspective of how things were and how things are now. Hopefully, all of the things I'm going to highlight, I think, seem maybe small in isolation, but in totality, they're what contribute to fixing this issue over time. We have a new app called I Am Responding. It's basically an electronification of the calls that we get in. And so instead of having to necessarily be in a building to know when there's a call, I can open up my phone and I get an alert of when calls are happening. That is hugely valuable to address what David was talking about, is not only do you need to be an EMT, but you need to be engaged within the system and see reps in the field in order to have the confidence to fill an essential role. So I completed my EMT course maybe 8 months ago. The day after I get my certification, I personally am not ready to go out and be the only EMT who's responding to an emergency. It's the difference between, classroom education and real world education. So I need to have the experience of responding to a call where a Lucas or a David is the primary EMT, and I'm able to take on part of that responsibility and learn in the field. The implementation of I am responding has greatly increased that ability, because no longer do I need to be waiting at IVAC for the call to come in. I can be at home during the evenings or the weekends, see that come through, and show up to a call to be able to integrate into that system. Again, it sounds small. It is a huge difference to have. We've opened a Slack account where before members used to text each other when they had questions or things like that. Now we have ongoing group chats about education opportunities, about events, about what else to highlight, right?
Equipment, yeah.
Equipment. Lucas is able to give on-the-fly training that we can reference back to when we need to know, hey, when you're at the hospital, this is how you keep the ambulance secure while still running. Things like that have just made it more efficient. They've talked through some of the training sessions, the teaching, the CPR. From a nuts and bolts standpoint, when to work, from a scheduling standpoint, going back to David's point, the paid personnel want to know way ahead of time. There's a difference between volunteerism, which is, hey, I'm free on Saturday, and someone who's showing up for a job and wants to know their schedule a month in advance, right? And so this has helped us level the playing field a little bit. So it's made it easier for Lucas to run that schedule and get people to commit ahead of time. And then small things like workspace upgrades, having a working refrigerator, having, a TV with Netflix, right? Again, you're spending 12 hours there. You want to be able to feel comfortable in the space. I think one of the biggest opportunities for us moving forward is we were able to secure a grant from Mary Jane Shimsky for capital improvements to the IVAC space. And so development of dedicated bedrooms. I think you guys saw the pictures that BBB put up. And to put a more personal touch on it, I would like to be someone who is contributing to help reduce that deficit. I'm at the point in my life where I don't want to sleep in a cot in an open floor space without, for me to make that commitment, I think it is really important to have it be a space that you're comfortable in and foregoing being in your own bed, right? And again, it's each of those things individually, maybe not as important as a whole. They're very important. And we're making progress on it. So Becky Doster, who was in my training program, is now doing Friday nights. So we, out of those 14 shifts, we now have half of one covered by a volunteer. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 100% improvement over nothing. So I think that's the one thing to emphasize on. I think Lucas's last point is we don't look at this support as a replacement for the efforts that we need to go through to building the level of culture and engagement in order to further solve that. There are realities of the situation that increased volunteerism, getting the high school students involved, those are all really important things to get us to that point, but they in the near term do not substitute for the realities of missing the paid overtime or paid per diem night shifts. Nancy Adler, who runs our recruitment efforts, talks about it in her own way. She thinks about it in like she's running a Christmas tree farm, and you have to plant those things way in advance. We have a lot of small trees that we're really focused on nurturing and growing. Occasionally, you have transplants coming in that are bigger and have a more near-term opportunity. And even in the last month's meeting, we had 3 new people who, one of which was an EMT, one of which said they'd be interested in nights. And so we are seeing early signs of that success. We're going to continue to push that as hard as we can. We're just not at that point where it can be, a flip of the switch.
So that was what we had to present. The only other thing that we attached, in addition to, the only thing we attached in addition to our income statement, we receive a bunch of these every year, but one that was recent to highlight happens to be a longtime village resident who didn't require services for a long time. His son is actually the head of the Central Park Medical Unit, an all-volunteer ambulance in New York City, and his father had a year-long battle with a respiratory disorder, and we actually attended to him many times. And the last time, actually, when he had a do not resuscitate order in place, those are really difficult calls to handle because essentially you are attending to an emergency where normally you would perform CPR and breathe for a patient and pass a tube down their throat. In this case, you just have to stand by the family, support them, and hold their hand as that person passes away. And so we were there for that moment with our crew. It's actually a recent evening back in January. But this is an important service we provide to the community. We're dedicated to improving it constantly and improving its economics. But it definitely makes a big splash when people need it. Hopefully they never do.
I mean, I think the letter was incredible, and thank you for your it's an incredible amount of dedication. I think many people could not do it. So, thank you. I'm gonna ask just a few questions on on your income statement. I see you have your training center as income, and then you also say a training center as an expense. Can you explain?
Yeah, most certainly. So our training center operates within the umbrella of our nonprofit. So we have folks who take our EMT course and then complete certification, pass the New York State exam, and New York State will pay us for the tuition of that student. There are other students who live in the area, high schoolers, college members, pre-med students from Mercer University, who perhaps don't or cannot volunteer with us. They will come to our center and pay us cash tuition. That income line item in the training center represents both reimbursements we get from New York State Department of Health and private tuition payments. We also secure some other Department of Health reimbursements that help us when folks renew their EMT certification within our agency every 4 years. And then the training center expense represents what we have to pay the instructors and the equipment that we have to buy, complex training mannequins, training equipment, simulation aids, etc.
It's designed to be break even, more or less.
A good number of those, particularly in the summer, is our most highly enrolled course where currently we are short on space. We actually have to turn away really highly dedicated Irvington high schoolers. We may have 25 or even I think almost 30 high school students, typically hyperlocal, Irvington or maybe one village over, who will come here for their summer, 180 hours plus a New York State exam just to get EMT certified in order to begin their pre-health career, pre-nursing, med, etc. So in this sort of nonprofit vein, we run the training center more or less at break even. But a lot of the folks that benefit from that, in this case, I think it's 4,000 or so that is a little more expense than revenue. A lot of our enrollees are local high school students, so it really sort of gives back to the community.
And a number of those come back for the next summer and drive with us. That 3 or 4 members.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes to the point about planting these trees and having them come back. This is an investment that ideally is break even. I think it is a contribution to the community, it tends to be very local in terms of the high school students. They do it for different reasons. A lot of them are interested in going into medicine in the long term and getting hands-on, experience before you have to be pre-med or commit to med school and find out that that isn't for you. So I think that's invaluable. It's something that we are getting more return on as we continue to make it an environment that they are able to integrate more with, right? And so not just coming 1 to 2 hours, but riding on the ambulance and things like that. And then lastly, they're coming back, not only a lot of them are juniors, you can become an EMT when you're 17 now, they just lowered the age. But during the summers as college graduate or as college members, they come back and volunteer. And so there is additional engagement, but again, that's not an overnight thing. That's not someone who can necessarily become a reliable filler of an essential role because they're here over the summer or on holiday break.
But Jesse, you're an alum of the program. You're an alum of the program. I'm an alum of the program. Heather's alum. I mean, most of our rock solid members are alums of the Irvington Training Center EMT program. And the Becky you referred to, she's an alum of the program. So it's planting trees.
So I think when we first sort of discussed supporting IVAC, I think, we talked about what was the sort of horizon for making you all sustainable, self-sustaining. What sort of, for the benefit of other people who don't know, sort of, what have you tried to do, and also what might the future look like? Are there opportunities?
Yeah, most certainly. So I mean, in the short term, I think the 8 volunteer covered shifts previously hovered around 6, perhaps a year plus ago. Now it's approaching from 8, should be 10 in the coming months. So these seeds that we plant, some of them may take years to materialize, some others may materialize much quicker. We continue to work with some of our closest neighbors to talk about resource sharing. Some of our neighbors have a lot of volunteers, some have none. So there is sort of a two-way street that seems to exist to reduce costs on all sides. But again, we tried to execute those in months, and it was simply too fast for what is most of Westchester County has about 48 EMS services. The lion's share are independent nonprofits. And the nature of an independent nonprofit is that it has its own culture, its own set of leaders, and trying to get those to mesh with others is likely something that's measured in years.
Yeah. So I think that's a good summary of the kind of external factors. The internal factors are some of the things that I tried to highlight. How do we, as a standalone entity, kind of improve that conversion? In addition to all the things that I talked about, we, I think in the past, didn't have and currently still don't have a great system for once we capture someone to come in and say, hey, I'm interested in volunteering with the agency, how do we convert that person into a core volunteer who is a David or a Heather who's able to fill those essential roles? And we didn't have the expertise or even something that we were tracking, right? We would bring someone in, we would kind of vote them in, and then we didn't have a great sense of their continued engagement. That's a primary focus for us going forward is, if you go to, marketing terms, the cost of acquisition is relatively low because we're not advertising. I think we're doing a better job of bringing in more volunteers, more high quality volunteers. What we really need to focus on is maintaining those, developing those, and converting those into core members. That structure has historically not been in place, and that's what we're working on. Because at the end of the day, getting that conversion rate higher is going to be the measure of when we can bring down that cost. The thing that we have to overcome is even if we're able to achieve 100% coverage of our daytime shifts, the nighttime shifts it's a different animal, right? And it's a different set of challenges that we have to solve. I think the bedroom situation is foundational and that, we're working on. And then we just need to figure out, what do our own members need in order to feel comfortable doing that? What do they need to feel to have the engagement to want to do that? Again, it's a hard question. I know for myself, right, what I want, and I'm trying to help use that to shape how we approach this challenge. But it's going to be very individual to the person who comes through the door.
The other side of reducing subsidies to increase revenue, and past years maybe done three things that have potentially increased revenue. One, we've increased the level of service to AEMT, basic life support, to advanced to intermediate life support. That allows for a higher level of billing for those calls where that level of care is warranted. Means for a somewhat higher recovery for those calls when we are able to bill them. That's number one. Number two, we have tried to undertake transports where they're available. You alluded to it. Transports are here and there, but we've been able to do a number of those, and that's just a whole secondary revenue stream from transports. You don't have any control over native 911 call volume, but by working closely with some of our adjacent agencies, if we're able to increase the native 911 call volume, that's the next step. But we really have no control over that.
You said you increased volunteers by 4. How many volunteers do you have at this point?
We were at we were at approximately 10 a couple of years back. And currently we sit about 41. A lot of those incoming volunteers, like we mentioned, the last cycle was 5. One of them was an EMT already, and one had previously driven emergency vehicles and just needed refresher. But many of them that come in said, hey, I want to take your EMT course. I want to take your driver training. So it takes time to foster those trainings. I mean, EMT training alone, we run one of the most accelerated schedules in the county, and it still takes approximately 3 months plus another month for the state to issue the certification.
Right, and then from that training to someone, because you mentioned, right, like you're not going to train as an EMT and then feel like you're ready to take that shift. What's the general time frame between training and then being like?
Yeah, I can. If you want to mention from your perspective, materially, it takes somewhere between 3 to 12 patient encounters that are supervised by someone else, but that number can vary wildly because in those patient encounters, there are 7 or 8 skills you have to perform. Patients who are not sick enough, thankfully, don't require those skills to be performed. So we've had individuals who come to the facility on days that are quiet. 911 call volume is not a linear thing. We had one day where we had 4 and then another 5 days with none. Right. So it can be months sometimes. We've had individuals who've taken a year who perhaps work a Wednesday night where there are rarely ever calls, and it does take time to achieve and check off those skills and basically become credentialed.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever have do you have like skills labs after EMT trainings where you can have people that gain, right? Because you can't predict what's going to come in, right? But
yeah, we certainly do. So we supplement with those. Obviously, the lower call volume, we try to supplement with skills labs. There are a few other things that have to be performed in the real world. So every hospital requires notification of an incoming 911 patient. Yeah. You have to provide a transfer of care report to an ER nurse or physician. Those are difficult to simulate. And when we attempted to simulate them, people feel they don't have the necessary competency. So again, there's some things you actually have to get done on the ambulance.
And then when someone goes through EMT training, there's no requirement, like you're not like, well, if you're taking EMT training with us, then we're going to ask you to sign up for volunteer hours. Do anything like that?
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I know that a lot of times they're paying you.
The EMT course does require ride-along time.
Uh-huh.
The ride-along time for our EMT course is with the town of Greenberg medics or EMTs.
and that's where they perform it. It's not a lot of times, like how many do you have to do?
Three or four 8-hour shifts.
Yeah, I think what's not hasn't been said well yet is that you get to the EMT course and you may be great at your skills, but that's a wholly different thing than really feeling confident
Right. Yeah.
addressing a patient. And
No.
and so it takes well, you might be able to to notionally lead a call. It may take you a year.
Yeah.
And putting in the time to get the calls, and native call volume is what it is. You really have to put in
Right.
time.
It's the difference between classroom learning and like
Yes.
field training.
Yes.
Right.
Just to add two things, in order to be eligible to apply for an EMT student to apply to New York State Department of Health to be paid for their tuition, either paid or paid back, they do have to be an active member within the organization. So we do have that requirement. We also have another sort of nugget, if you will, that's funded by Westchester County. It's called the HERO program. So it's basically a scholarship with almost no strings attached. I think 4,000 or 6,000 a year. It requires a person to sign a notarized letter, actually committing the next year of volunteer service to the organization. So we have that, but it only applies to folks who have university, trade school, or college tuition payments or tuition loan repayments. So we have some tools at our disposal to sort of create that engagement.
And I know, Max, you said you're working on, kind of tracing and figuring out. I think the big thing would be like when you have people coming through the door, what makes a difference between them becoming lifetime members or lifetime volunteers and then people that kind of drift? Do you have a sense of why that drift happens or?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to think about it, put yourself in that person's shoes of, they're coming in and a lot of times the experience is in a situation where as a person, we're very uncomfortable, right? Like the hands-on experience is you're showing up to somebody's home, you're going in at a time when, a lot of things are happening and you don't necessarily know what to do, right? And so the biggest change that I've seen is having the right. It's a bit of a catch-22. You have to have the right people who are experienced volunteers to be the mentors for the people who are showing up on the calls, right? And so we always like to highlight David and Heather are on Monday and Tuesday. That is the absolute best time to have a new member come in and experience a call with them because they are so teaching oriented, right? And so that's hard to replicate, right, on every single shift. But what we're working on is creating tighter bonds within the people who are coming in to use each other as resources. So you're not just standing there, on the side, not sure what to do and not gaining as much as you would be if we had a kind of a coordinated plan of attack. Those are things that kind of happen slowly, but we're working on. Just to go back to maybe your earlier question, in terms of the timing, I think Lucas said it, even though thankfully 90% of our calls, maybe not as high, but 50% of our calls are lower acuity, as the essential personnel, you have to be ready to be there and be the one responsible for someone who's having a cardiac arrest and bring them back to life, right? And so that responsibility in order to feel comfortable is hard to replicate because those happen. I don't know how many cardiac arrests.
Dozen a year.
Yeah, right. Like you have to have been on one of those.
Yeah, last Monday.
Yeah, well, right. And so I think part of the problem, if I was to call it that, is that we are fortunate in this community to have a low native call volume, right? And that is a problem for us as a nonprofit, as a business, because that is our revenue line. It is great for the community because it means that we're healthy, right? And we strive in an ideal world to have a zero revenue line. That's a fundamental challenge that we can't overcome, and these are the things we're doing to kind of address that.
I mean, do you think that that the answer will be sort of Rivertown's kind of back situation?
Yeah, it could be. It's a pretty long discussion, but I think there are still very active conversations that are happening with a couple of the River Towns partners, and even finding opportunities to perhaps maintain independence, but share resources, share coverage in times where there are minimal calls. So this 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. hour to get into the granularity, there are minimal 911 calls across the river towns. That doesn't apply to the rest of Westchester because we don't have nightlife, we don't have clubs, we don't have nighttime activities. There are definitely opportunities, and we're researching them aggressively. We're in talks, we're having meetings, sometimes multiple times a week. So there are opportunities there, and the beauty of, I know from a financial perspective, which is a conversation we're having now, the idea that there are many small VACs or volunteer ambulance agencies serving each of these river towns does on its surface seem a touch wasteful, but Irvington in particular, if I can speak about this community, having readiness that is this close with this level of training and this high level of equipment is a huge benefit to the residents. The residents want readiness. They don't want an ambulance that they're borrowing from the border of Yonkers, or borrowing a for-profit commercial ambulance from White Plains when they need it. They want to know that someone's there in minutes for their child that has a traumatic brain injury, or their grandfather who's having a stroke, etc. So those are the big dichotomies. Large metro areas have big shared EMS services, and then they spread the vehicles far and wide, which results in a lot of long response times, but really cheap cost. I think the level of service that these folks expect, that we've come to learn that the residents expect, is sort of that high level. I think there's an opportunity to provide that with our structure, and also continue to chase cost saving opportunities with others.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I thank you for your time. Thank you for your engagement and questions.
Our next, here, the fire department.
Let me take care. No, I'm not coming back. That'll be never again.
Yeah.
Hey, kitty, you having a good time?
Just get right to it. Do you want to read or?
Yeah, I can kind of walk
Okay.
through and then you can, chime in. All right, so the cover sheet here is listing the difference between the current year original budget and the recommended column. And then there's also a requested column with the fire department's request, I will let them speak to as well. So the first line on here is the personnel services line. So the 1,881 increase is reflective of the current salaries on this line. So this is made up of the 3 chief stipends, and then there's 2 part-time staff within that department. So do you want to talk about your requests?
We talked about the stipend increase the other night, so I think we're gonna, we got denied, so we'll keep moving on.
The next line, we're just reallocating the 5,000 from support services to the equipment line.
Correct. So with that, obviously costs are increasing, as everyone knows. We tried to keep that 31,000 for equipment down, but we are currently already over budget this fiscal year. So for the first time since I've been chief, we got over budget items, and that includes turnout gear that is expiring per the NFPA regulations of 10 years. So we are going to have to talk about how to fund that, because we can't deny that. We can't go to training. Excuse me, it can be denied, but then we don't get the training that we need, because the county does regulate that. And if you come over there with gear that is expired, then they will kick you off the fire ground.
We certainly don't want you to have expired care.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we just have to figure out how
We'll
we're
just have
gonna
to put
fund
in
it.
a budget transfer request, so look at other lines, if there's, extra funds there. Like, for example, the Irvington Boat Club lease at 5,700, I'm sure is not going to be, used this year. We can transfer that and kind of.
But you're not gonna shut
look
that
at some
line
other
item
lines.
down, right?
No, it's
Money
just
over.
it's just moving it for this year.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll just have to do a budget transfer request to
To put it in
fund
perspective,
that
that's one
line.
set of year.
Yeah, that is one set.
That's one set of year. That's not ouch. That's one set of perspective. What we.
Fair point. Okay.
Okay, so the next line is the supplies line. So there was a request for food and supplies for weather standby
Right.
instances. So the request was for 3,000, and then the recommendation was for 1,000.
I will let the board make that decision. With
Why don't you speak to it?
Well, no. I was going to. So with the ever-changing climate, flooding, the storms over the summer, we have the department fully staffed during those storms, which obviously it could be any time of night, day or night. We've gone out and purchased food for members. The recent standby for the snow, we spent over $1,000 for ourselves and the village employees. We offered them to come up for a meal. Came out of our budget. So we're just company excuse me, came out of company budget.
Yes.
Really should come out of the operating, not the company. So we're looking to, put 3,000 in that line item. We never had that line item before. We never had to have that, but now we understand we do. So I know Charles or Katie's recommendation was 1,000. We're looking for 3. Obviously, if we don't use that, we would reallocate it, in instance like the equipment line.
I have a question on that, because I know that we've had this conversation many times on complications of like the village buying food. What are the limits for that?
I think it's because it's a volunteer organization that it's allowable. The guidance when it comes to like volunteers versus village employees is very different. So in that case, I think it would be allowable. I can look up a little more guidance on it.
Yeah, I mean, my only question would be, would it matter if, obviously it's going to be, it's going to be for more than, I'm assuming, how many people were from the firehouse?
A dozen.
Yeah,
Dozen.
12.
And for about 12 hours.
Yeah.
It was a dozen of us. There was 4 or 5 police
Police officers
officers
and
There was
DPW.
No,
five-
I'm getting to a different issue, so
Oh,
like
and if staff are like required to like work through like an emergency situation where they're required to like stay on shift, in those situations, it's allowable as well. Yeah.
So I think we need a little more guidance so that we make sure
yeah.
what the, okay, but,
Yeah, so
okay.
so you're saying during the recent event, it was 12 hours, $1,000. The 3,000 is reflective of you're anticipating.
hurricanes,
Yeah.
waters, ice storms.
No.
anything.
I understand that there are going to be weather events. What I'm asking about is are you pricing out 3,000 for, like, you're saying like, okay, we'll probably have 3 of those events a year. Like, where's
At a
the 3,000
minimum,
coming from?
yeah, at a minimum, at least 3.
And are you basing it on hours? Are you basing it on number of people?
A little combination of both. If you look at one of the summer storms that we had, we were running from 4 in the afternoon till
4 a.m.
4 a.m. So, trying to get everybody a little bite to eat so we can actually stay energized and
A
focused.
rush hour flood.
Oh, right. I should know this, but do you have a minimum that you need at the firehouse during these events? Like, is
For
there-
a standby?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's almost like another call. So as long as we can get,
4 firefighters,
4
plus
firefighters, a
officer in charge,
driver.
plus the safety officer.
Yeah.
Maybe
6
talk to
people?
6.
Okay, so you had 12 in case you had to call or whatever.
And some people were in and out too.
That's true.
get back to their families and then come back.
Almost walk home.
Still waiting for the application. Just kidding.
It's
Okay.
perfectly located.
Thanks. Oh,
Oh, now you too?
Oh, sorry.
thank you. Next, I guess travel and education. So we did up that by about 5,000. I think it was 5,000. Yes. To account for third-party training companies that we're utilizing now. Westchester County Department of Emergency Services obviously does host a plethora of courses. Doesn't always meet the needs that we want. I'll just use like an elevator course, right? We bring in a third party expert to train us in how to become elevator, I would say, not technician level, but rescue level. So if you're stuck in a stalled elevator, God forbid, we know how to do that, right? We become the experts.
Building construction.
Building construction, which is a huge component, especially with the ever-changing landscape of building construction, as you probably have seen and you've seen with
And
your.
there's county courses that get filled up right away and they just don't have enough of them. So we have to bring in, for instance, pump operations. We have to supply basically our own training for that through third parties because there's just not at the county level.
And we're working with the county to bring courses across the street to our firehouse. But then as a result of that, because we're opening it up to other departments within the county, we do have to, there is an expense to bring county training officers to a local department. But we are also just using third parties because some of their academic topics are just more enticing than going to the training center and running through the burn building. We do that on a regular basis over the spring and summer. It's nice out, but we also want to have some in-house trainings as well.
Do you ever do trainings with other river towns?
All the time.
All the time.
So whenever we go to the burn building across at the county, we do bring at least one or two other departments because it allows us to have a greater number of firefighters on the ground. There are minimum requirements that we have to have when we do burn trainings, but we like to simulate different exercises, right? Search and rescue, which that's one set of that's a set of members and 5 or 6 firefighters to do that. There's fire suppression, there's setting up the ladders. So we absolutely bring as many departments as we can. We typically work with our Elmsford, Tarrytown, Dobbs Ferry, Ardsley, because those are the folks that are in our mutual aid plan. So we want to make sure that we're comfortable with their operations and they're comfortable with ours. So absolutely, we even by not going over to the training center, if we're doing trainings here or other departments are doing trainings at their facility, we'll go to their firehouse. They'll come to ours as well.
David Schweibel had a question. If you have approached David and Memora, who's our county legislator, about bringing more training to our fire department.
So to our fire department, so that's an interesting question. So we have recently engaged the county training center for in-house trainings. So we actually have a 4-meter class gas meter that is coming up in May that they're opening up to us and the county or county firefighters within the neighboring towns. I'm also looking to bring in an IVAC class so we can start getting more and more of our firefighters driving experience. That'll also likely open up to other towns, but we're not opposed to that because we'll have first dibs on who can join. So yes, now that the county is willing, so let me take a step back. The county was unwilling to have county training courses held at local fire departments. They have subsequently relaxed that rule, and now they are bringing county level training courses to local departments, and then obviously those local departments include the neighboring towns.
But the county doesn't really always apply what we need.
Correct.
Yeah. They, for some reason, I like to hate this. I'll say it out loud. So I think they're reluctant sometimes with the volunteers. Because it's a union, non-union type of thing, union versus volunteers. And my opinion is with the county, and I'll say it out loud too, is the union really wants to control the fire service in the county. So there does seem to be reluctance. We need like a basic firefighter course. Sometimes they're like pulling teeth trying to get them. What are some of the other courses we had a hard time getting?
There's, the firefighter one
One firefighter,
program.
firefighter
to
one
train-
program.
Firefighter one.
Charles and I just met with the county executive and they wanted just to have, they were having a conversation about how they can help the village. And we actually talked a little bit, but we can sort of have that conversation with them.
We would love to have that
We
guy
can,
come to one of our battalion meetings, which is Irvington, Tarrytown, Hastings, Dobbs, Elmsford. And have them come talk to us there.
Are you the county executive?
Yeah, why not?
I'm sure
They would reach out to Russell Maitland.
Yes.
Yeah, I met Russell at Ardsley.
He's our battalion 14 coordinator.
Okay.
Yes.
They also floated the names of the county fire commissioner or Susan Spears. I thought what?
She's the commissioner.
Okay, so who's below that?
One of them just retired.
Oh, you're talking about the deputy county executive.
No.
Oh, Wishney.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about Wishney. Figure it out. You know what I'm talking about.
I don't what
we've had Susan Spears, who was the deputy.
Now she's
the commissioner. She has come to our battalion meetings. We voiced concerns around getting particular trainings or more trainings at the county.
If you're interested, I can reach out to him.
Why not?
We're not going to say no.
I mean, they've offered the support. We might as well ask for it.
Absolutely, yeah.
We just met with them this week. So.
And I will say that
It's fresh.
one of the bigger things has been getting the county to agree to do satellite courses in local departments. And we're seeing the number of folks going to those trainings, whether it's our department or others, significantly increase to the point where there's a waiting list. So that just proves that they need to do yet another course and at a local fire department.
Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of courses at the county level that literally fill up within an hour of being posted. So that's what we have to bring in. I mean, truck company operations, one of them, fast operations is one.
We are lucky with our battalion coordinator, Russell, who gives the departments within his battalion a heads up. So we have the inside scoop typically when a course is going to, open up so we can jump on it very quickly.
Well, one of the things we have to talk to them about is officer development courses. Or otherwise, you're going to see the same three of us for the next couple of years, and I really don't want to do this anymore. Okay, I keep making that abundantly clear.
I don't hear it.
Are there courses now that people can take, or
yes, there are. It's just
members that are interested in doing that.
We have one that's definitely taking I think he's taking the courses now, or is about to when they open up. So it's it's like we talked about, right? It's a lot of rules and regulations and
it's a commitment beyond the regular fire calls.
Yeah, it's a lot, but we're working on it.
We'll have some conversation.
And let me know. We can talk,
we'll talk
on the
more
side,
about it.
and
we'll talk more about it.
Okay,
for sure.
Okay, that was training.
That was the thing you were talking about, travel and education, right?
Yes, yes, yep. And then
The next line on the list here is just insurance. So this is the fire piece of our general liability insurance, which we're estimating to increase at 7%. And that this number was reflected in the original budget overview. This is just the fire piece that's allocated on this line. The heating oil, natural gas, and NIPA lines that can stay flat based off of the current usage and the cost trends. The next line.
And the one thing I do want to add on that, we do have the gas line conversion capital project. I know there's a lot of back and forth at the moment with the oil tank that may or may not be sufficient.
It's a much more complicated
project. I know. So
I mean,
we might be able to reduce some oil cost if we can get the gas, but I know there's a bigger.
The building inspector initiated a call today with Edison Venegas from Tiagen Venegas to look at we need to look at the village boiler as well. Yeah. So we're going to engage him in that. Todd Smith had been working to try to find a solution, but it looks like it's a much bigger nut to crack.
Yeah. Trying to get some cost savings.
We're working on it, and if we do see that project come to fruition, what the chief's saying is true. see some savings there.
The repairs and maintenance of equipment line is reflective of the annual software maintenance costs. So currently it's about $9,927 per year. So we're estimating that it's a little bit, the current year was a little bit under budgeted for that. And assuming there'll be an increase, we're upping that line to 10,500, which in total results in a $2,500 increase on that line. And then the last item is the maintenance of vehicles line, where there's an increase of 10,000 due to aging apparatus and increased repair costs. And if you look at how that line has looked over the past several years, in 2023, the expenses were about 44,000. Last year, they were about 47,000, and year to date, they're about 32,000. So they are increasing.
Now, could you say if that's specifically related to one apparatus? I know you're looking to replace the rescue. Are those costs
Right, I
generally
mean-
rescue, or is it kind of
I mean,
varied?
no, I mean, the ladder is a big one just because it's so old and we've held on to it for so long and.
It's spread across.
Yeah.
We've had some increased costs on the rescue this current year for a number of reasons. The cascade system, the the battery backup. So there's definitely been increased costs on the rescue. It is typically across each of the apparatus, which unfortunately the reality is they don't make them and I hate saying that, but they really don't make it. The trucks like they used to.
But they charge you.
I mean, you guys could probably tell, right? Your washer and dryer isn't made like it used to be, and it doesn't last as long.
And again, it goes back to that NFPA thing. We can't have 10-year-old tires on a truck. Truck might have 1,000 miles on it. But 10 years, you're spending how many thousands of dollars on tires? What's each tire? $500, $600 a tire?
Fire trucks,
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, well, you know, ladder takes 10 of them. You know, ouch. You
and
know?
I did an analysis between 2024 and then current just to see where we should fluctuate or increase or if we could shift some funds around. So I think it's a pretty good reflection of where our costs are. Now, vehicle maintenance, it's harder, right? To say. I mean, we do get them inspected every year, and we allocate a certain dollar amount. But depending on what the issues are, you know, we could go over that at any given point. So we try not to, obviously, but you know, I can't necessarily predict, you know, how an engine's going to work or you know if a battery is going to die.
Even with that, you know, the pumps have to be tested every year. The ladder has to be tested every year. The hose has to be tested every year. The ground ladders have to be tested every year.
So there's certain obligations right out the bat that we have to do. And then obviously it's the maintenance of the vehicle after the inspections, right? So there's the inspection part of the pumps and everything that Chris said. And then there's, I don't want to say the extra, right? But something's going to break during those inspections or a ladder may not pass the test. So then we have to get another ladder and then.
Or you don't use something for a little while and then you're at a big fire and you're pumping the hell out of a truck and something happens.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions? No?
We
Okay.
should have went first. We were the quickest
Yeah.
ones.
I know, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
The luck of the draw.
I was the unlucky part of that draw.
But you get to hang out with us for
Chief,
hours.
what's the age of your gear apparatus or the washer, gear washer?
Our washing machine? Oh my God,
Gotta be 10 or 12 years old by now.
more than that. I have to say.
Have you pursued what's it, AFG grant, Assistance Firefighter grant? They've been used to replace gear washers.
Not yet,
Might be
because it
something
still
that-
works.
Yeah,
So
but maybe you can get two.
But that's also should be going in with the
The deconduit, I was just gonna say, that'd be hand in hand with
I
that.
would, I
That has
would
to be a part of that.
agree with you. I just honestly don't know where we put it right
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
now. I like the way you're thinking,
Here's
but
one.
Yeah, I
unfortunately.
know spaces.
Thank you so much.
You got it. Have a good night.
That was
So I guess that's it. We're
That's it. We're done.
Katie, do you give a sense of where we're at, like in terms of the? I feel like we're already over. Is that true?
It's a roller coaster. So as of now, we are about 9,000 under the cap. But that's not taking into account any of the requests from the departments that haven't presented yet.
Better than I thought.
9,000
Under, yeah.
Somehow.
Okay.
Yes.
It's interesting. I can ask this, but don't. Isn't it?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so
that
much.
They have been under, I mean, they have like under budgeted revenue and then, has that happened? I feel like I'm right in a different year.
Yeah, typically their actuals do come in over the budgeted number. I can put together like the past, you know, 5
That would be
years.
helpful. That
Okay.
would be helpful.
Okay.
Because I kind of remember that, just like how our, what is it, our surplus fund? What is that called?
Fund balance.
The fund balance. Charles is like, you know, the fund balance. Yeah. Because we always end up like, you know, I remember like even when we use fund balance in the past, remember, we'd just be like,
Did
Well, I think
we
it-
adjourn this meeting?
yeah, we adjourned.
Oh, okay, we
adjourned.
adjourned. Okay.
Oh, you
so-
haven't.
Okay,